You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 591 for June 25th, 2024, and I'm J.D. Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
I'm also barely alive, so there's that.
You're doing good.
Here.
We just got done talking about the bike riders, so you got the right medicine in you to at least feel a little bit rejuvenated, right?
Yeah, for those that haven't been following me on social media at all in recent days, I have been knocked out by some sort of virus. Could be COVID. I don't know. I didn't really take a test. My wife, I think, refused to give me one because she didn't want to know.
She wanted to plead ignorance.
A little nervous. So we didn't take a test, but it could be that, or it just could be the flu, some sort of virus. I don't know. Either way, it knocked me on the ground. I have not felt this horrible since I had COVID the first time officially, and that was in 2020, I believe. So, the last 5 days have not been fun for me. Have not been fun, and I know I'm a little bit behind, but here we are.
Well, I'm glad you're on the mend.
We're on the mend.
Yeah.
I'm able to at least do the show. We'll see how it goes. I'm not necessarily going to be all there mentally. I'm pretty doped up on a lot of drugs right now, but
you're going to be bringing a very different personality to this show, which I think will make this one pretty fun. Maybe I'll try to overcompensate by being overly personified and being overly animated just to make up for it. So this might be a very weird episode then.
Yeah, I can't really bring my usual energy as much as I would like to. I would struggle to get animated in any sort of way.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because, Brendan, the parade is definitely on, my friend. It is on in multiple ways.
We need a little clip or something for you to play whenever the parade is on, something very party-like, something celebratory, and then you need something that suggests the parade has ended. That's so when the box office is not in the right direction. But yeah, Inside Out, we've been talking a lot about how movie theaters are struggling this year, and that is still technically true. That narrative hasn't changed, but the numbers that Inside Out 2 is putting up right now, it's comparable to what numbers used to be when theaters were up and running and functional and the place to be, right? This is like nostalgia that I'm getting from how well this is performing.
Absolutely. However, before I get to that, I want to make note that Brendan completely skipped through the fact that I was referencing that the parade is literally on in Fort Lauderdale, down the road for me. It is
you got to be
literally
clearer
happening.
with your diction, man. You got to be, because we've been talking about the parade as the box office. We're not talking about hockey right now.
That's why I said in multiple ways. This is happening in multiple ways.
There are multiple parades happening now.
Yeah, the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup. I live in South Florida, for those who don't know. Yeah. And the place is buzzing. They took the Stanley Cup to the beach, of course. They threw it into the ocean, they jumped into the ocean with it. They were serving people beer from the second level of this bar.
Of course they were, because that's just what you do.
Just what you do. They're having a great old time. And of course, I am sick. I could be down there at the Elbow Room tonight, hanging out with everybody and watching the Panthers celebrate with the cup, but I've been sick this whole time, so no, I can't. I've been stuck at home.
They might win again. What is this? Their fifth cup that they've won?
First.
Their first
in franchise history.
Oh, I'm confusing it with the Oilers, aren't I? Because they've won 4 times. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. The Oilers have won it. Yeah, 4 or 5 different times.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, this was the Panthers' first cup in their franchise history in 30 years, which is very exciting. After losing in the Stanley Cup final last year, they win Game 7 In fact, I saw the numbers. I almost sobbed. I was so excited to read this, Brendan, that the TV ratings for that game last night was it was something like the highest watched non-NFL game since like 2019 or something like that. It was crazy. Like it was like people were watching.
Are we in a world where hockey is no longer a niche sport in America? Is this the turning point?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, when the state of Florida takes over your sport, and one of my favorite tweets that I saw over the weekend when they won is that, the state of Florida, their 2-year cup drought is over because the Florida or the Lightning had won it 2 years in a row in 21.
Yeah.
So I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, like the state of Florida has somehow turned into this electric hockey state.
Which is so ironic because it's a state that has no ice on the ground any time of the year, right?
No, well, and here's the fun thing about that, not to get too much into a rabbit hole, but here we are. The NHL, every year they have these outdoor games, these outdoors series that they want to do. And the NHL commissioner, Gary Bettman, has stated he wants to do one in South Florida.
There it is. Okay.
I don't know how you make that work because it is hot here all the goddamn time.
I know. That's the funny thing.
If you do it at the Marlins Stadium, which has a roof, it's covered. I don't know if that counts as being outdoor, quote unquote, but that's the only way you can make that work and sell it as outdoor.
It's almost like he's doing this on purpose just to see if he can, embrace the challenge and see if the sport is up to it.
Yeah, perhaps. At any rate, people are watching. I mean, like Texas has done really well. The Carolina Hurricanes has done really well. Like the sport is definitely spreading. It might be becoming less niche as I've made it out to be. I talked about that quite a bit on I think that was the Inside Out 2 review we did last week.
I believe so, which, Pixar's hockey movie, as we talked about.
Yeah. But maybe that's a part of it as well, because to your point, before I rudely interrupted you,
You're good.
Inside Out 2 is absolutely crushing. It is well on its way to $1 billion. And
wow. We're at a point now where we have to be talking about if it's going to hit $1.5 billion. Like it's on that kind of path.
It's made $750 million worldwide already in 2 weeks. That is insane. And what's great about it is that it is a hockey movie. We talked about that quite vividly. I brought visual aids and everything to our review to talk about the hockey specifically. I even created a separate video, like a clip that you can watch on our YouTube channel where it's just that portion of the conversation. So yeah, if you want to go and check all that out, but like when your film is doing gangbusters like that, and it's a hockey movie, and the Florida Panthers are in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final against the Edmonton Oilers, one of the original 6, and everyone's tuning in, the sport is just growing, I guess.
Well, that's what makes me think about this further. We knew Inside Out 2 was going to be a big hit. It was originally tracking, like 90 million to make on its opening weekend domestically. Funny enough, it made 100 million domestically on its second weekend. So it even beat those initial tracking numbers that people were expecting for its first weekend. I mean, it's a family film. Parents and families are going to go to this movie. And if kids really like it, they're going to want to see it again. So you're going to get multiple audiences that see it multiple times. But do you think there are other people who are also seeing it just because of the hockey of it all? That is, I think, a fair question. If that's adding to this, if the timing of it really is on its side, that we're seeing people loving this movie because of the hockey of it. I think that's a genuine possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I can't go as far as to say because of the hockey of it all.
I think that's the hockey. I think it's part of it. The hockey,
it is really great in the film. It's rendered beautifully for all the reasons we talked about last week. And yeah, I think people are starting to become more aware of the sport, and it's growing, and it's now on ESPN. As much as I hate ESPN, I
That's
think
fair.
they've done a horrible job of promoting the sport, but it's ESPN, and there's not many outlets out there that can do it, that can give you those kind of numbers. So that's probably helped a lot as well. And again, nothing against Edmonton. You know, they have their 4 or 5 cups. They'll be fine, and they'll likely win another one because they have Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
But when a team like the Florida Panthers wins, or the San Jose Sharks, they're years away. But like when you get these markets, these warm weather markets that start winning, and the game starts becoming more prominent, you know, the way we've seen it grow even in Texas with the Dallas Stars and everything. I mean, that's how you grow the sport to where it can transcend some of the hurdles that it's had historically. Now, because of how expensive the sport is, there's always going to be a giant hurdle that you have to deal with there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, I just think there's so much culminating in terms of Inside Out 2 being this huge hit. And of course, hockey is a big part of it, and everything that's been taking place over the last month or so. The sport has just been in the spotlight, and
it's a hockey year
in a way I haven't seen in literally 25 years.
Yeah, and the fact that it's your favorite sport, you must be electrified right now.
Man, that's why I said I was on the verge of sobbing. You know, like
I don't blame
something that I love so deeply is starting to get more into the mainstream. Like it still it's still a long ways away from like baseball and basketball and football, but like it is growing, like it is getting there, and that did bring some healing to me these last few days as well. And another thing too along those lines, you know, because I do want to talk about Inside Out 2 and this incredible run they're on, but you know, as I noted, I've been, you know, really sick over these last 5 days. But one of the beautiful, absolutely gorgeous not consequence, but I guess the fruit that has blossomed as a result is that my oldest has been very empathetic. The last time I was this sick, he was 4.
Okay.
4 going on 5. So I don't think he really had that kind of emotional capacity yet at that age. But now
that's a good point. Yeah. He sees how serious that sickness can be.
Exactly. So now that he's seen me really down and out, he's been a lot more emotional seeing me the way that I am. So like he's been very comforting. He's wanted to cuddle. Like I've never seen him this cuddly with me. And
he's like a dog. You know, dogs have that kind of connection with their owners when they know that they're in pain or they're not feeling well. They tend to get kind of cuddly, like they're guarding you, they're protecting you, and your son's doing that for you. That's kind of sweet.
It is very adorable. And the other night, he wanted to watch the first Inside Out, which I hadn't seen in quite a few years. But he had never seen it, even though he went with me to see the sequel last week, which I talked about in our review. He had never seen the first one, so he chose that movie. He wanted to watch the first Inside Out, so he gets on the couch, he starts cuddling me, and we watch the movie. And when we get to the scene of Riley in the pit, and she has the epiphany, and the connection to her and sadness and what that means, I was sobbing, like uncontrollably sobbing. I could not contain it at all.
I wish I could see that happen. You got to videotape yourself next time that happens, and I got to FaceTime you as it's happening in real time.
Yeah, it was not a pretty sight, especially because I'm already on I'm dying to begin with, and now I'm sobbing and coughing, and I could not keep it together at all.
Your body was broken in more ways than one.
Utterly broken, but it was like, I mean, talk about creating a core memory. Like that is a core memory I'll take with me forever. Like that was an unbelievable night. And another thing I noticed as well, speaking of the hockey, because that film ends with, you know, the family coming together, which is another beautiful moment that I know others have. I don't talk about as enough when Riley gets back to the house and she
Yeah.
is open with her feelings and the family comes together. My God, I lost it again at that moment.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But you get to the end and she's going out onto the ice to play the game. So she gets out there and the ref drops the puck and you get kind of this slow fading shot out. So you get like this wide shot of the ice. And I was kind of blown away again.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we talked about the hockey specifically in our review of Inside Out 2, that shot, as short as it is, it's probably a 10-second shot.
Yeah.
15 seconds maybe. That's all that it is. And it's just kind of this zooming out shot that just kind of ends the movie.
And
Riley
yet,
getting to play hockey.
Yeah.
This time in San Francisco, she's making new friends. She's coming around. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But just to the hockey itself, for as short as it is, I was sitting there going, whoever did this knows exactly how this game works. Like the animation blew me away because the way their skates are, the way they have their sticks out in relation to where they're going and skating, as if they were defending for real. Like it would have been just real easy to animate them lazily and just have
skating around in a circle. And to be honest, you know,
exactly, just making it very cartoonish. Like
Yeah.
you could have just made it very cartoonish. No one would have known or cared because it's just the outro to the movie and that's it. No, like they render that sequence with vivid, beautiful detail. That
how funny is it?
Unreal.
How funny is it that if you were to do a list, maybe like a top 10 or something like that, top 10 movies for kids about hockey, the top 2 are probably Inside Out and then Inside Out 2. It's like, because I mean, I can't, like, what other films for kids specifically that depict hockey or are about hockey are as accurate as, I mean, the Mighty Ducks are, that's not the case. Like, that is not the movie. Like,
I
Mr.
don't
Alaska is, but like that's not really a kid's movie.
No, I don't really know many that are for kids outside of the Mighty Ducks movies.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There could be more out there. There's generally just not many hockey movies in general because historically it's been a niche sport.
Yeah.
So like there's just not a whole lot
Miracle.
out there.
Maybe Miracle, I guess, would be.
Miracle, you could. I would say that one's pretty good for kids. That one's not too crazy.
Yeah. Goon is not really for kids. I'm trying to do some research here.
Slapshot, absolutely not.
No.
Mr. Alaska, absolutely not.
We already talked about how the Mighty Ducks movies just don't get hockey right, so they don't count.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that answer is.
Yeah. There's just not many out there. I would love to see more, but I don't know until.
We might get more. We might get more with Inside Out 2's success, and then when we get Inside Out 3, it'll be about Riley going pro.
Well, I think part of it also is the landscape of film has changed so much. Like sports movies of yesteryear, we don't really get a whole lot anymore. Generally, what was the last sports movie we got that wasn't swimming in the ocean trying to break a record?
Creed 3, maybe.
Okay, boxing.
But still, like boxing / fighting movies, I feel like they're almost in their own category. Like there's a specific subset of sports movie that's reserved for boxing movies, right? Like that's kind of its own genre. But to your point, movies about baseball, movies about anything involving
like Moneyball,
anything involving ball play.
The Taika Waititi soccer movie, I guess, which wasn't great, but
yeah, like that. But to your point, yeah, that one was sort of forgotten about. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
We just don't get a whole lot of sports movies in general anymore.
No, but it's a lost art, unfortunately. I would love to see that come back.
I would too. I always enjoyed them. Remember the Titans is a film that I always loved as a kid. And it's funny because I feel like, for one, it's been so fantastic in terms of creating memes for like real sporting like real football stuff that we see every single year. For one, but also when you all someone has to do is give us that shot of, I forget the character's name, of the coach in the game where the referees are trying to screw them and he calls the timeout and he brings them over. Like all you need is like a screenshot of that moment. And if you have seen that film and you know what's taking place there, instant chills. Like you know what's about to take place.
You feel like you need to applaud. Like you feel that urge to applaud. Yeah.
Like it's just so good. Like, oh my gosh.
There's movie making. Yeah, it's trickery, but it's the right kind of trickery to elicit that kind of emotional response from us. I feel like sports movies are the ones that best get away with it. And, as we're talking, I'm trying to look at what are some modern sports movies, maybe specifically of the 2020s, if we want to keep it very modern, that might qualify here. And, there are some good ones, movies like The Way Back or Hustle, King Richard, I guess Air, The Novice, but none of these really fit into the same, I guess, threshold of that traditional sports movie that we're talking about. They have a different type of edge. They feel very different. They're a bit more domestic, if that makes sense.
I feel like many of those also, it's domestic might be the best way to phrase it, because, King Richard, I guess there's a lot of tennis there, but that one was
about the life outside of tennis. It's about them.
Exactly.
Tennis
like
is kind of a cipher.
There's a marketing movie. Like it's about the shoes. It's not really about the sport itself. I mean the traditional sports movie, I just feel like we haven't really seen in some time.
Yeah,
which is fine. Like I love the Moneyballs of the world. Like I don't have to have the conventional. But I always enjoyed them. I do miss them.
I'm actually
they came back.
I'm surprised that we didn't get more of them after the success of Creed back in 2015, because that was, while it is still a boxing movie and that is like its own subgenre, like we talked about, it still had a lot of the same formulas that we tend to see in sports movies, but it was done so in such a way that it made it seem fresh all over again. Like I almost felt like that film could have spearheaded a new movement of these kinds of sports films, and we just didn't really see that happen outside of the Creed films, which kind of maintained that. I feel like they were the only ones doing that for a while.
The Creed films are great. There will never be a shortage of like fighting movies. Boxing movies. Certainly like something like Warrior comes to mind is one of my favorite films of the last 15 years. Rush was a nice surprise. I did not ever see that coming when that came out in 2013. But I just, outside of, I guess, the Creed movies, there's just not much there. At any rate, that is to say, like if they ever start making more and they want to do another hockey movie, I'm certainly down for that. But maybe I can also live with. I was gonna say I can live with Inside Out 2 being my hockey movie, because I thought it was absolutely fantastic as a hockey movie.
Yeah, I mean, we jokingly call it Pixar's hockey movie, but it is kind of facetious, but it's also not. Like that is kind of an accurate statement.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly well rendered as a hockey movie. It truly is. I was blown away. Like whoever is doing that is giving it detail that is absurd. Like it's really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
At any rate, so that film is on its way to $1 billion. Now it does evoke the question, and I've seen some people quite reserved on social media. Are we ever going to get a Pixar original again because of the success of this film? It is, I guess, a little heartbreaking given that, announcement they did a few weeks ago. We're going to focus on, these movies unless the Lucas and the Turning Reds of the world. And I don't think the successful failures of those movies, and you and I came on here a few weeks ago. We argued that those films, given the context in which they came out, they were successful. Luca especially was a huge hit on streaming. That film in a post or a pre-pandemic world, man, maybe even now, if Luca came out now, I think it would destroy.
Oh, I genuinely think, given, like, let's say hypothetically, we lived in a world where Disney and Pixar actually decided to save the release of Luca when it was safe to release it in theaters, and they didn't do this whole thing. But let's say movies like Soul and Turning Red got the sprinkling of digital and theatrical releases that they still did. If hypothetically a movie like Luca, which really does have universal appeal, if they decided to release that after Inside Out 2, that's $1 billion movie. I think
Yeah.
Luca is $1 billion movie.
I agree. I agree. I mean, and you, again, like the whole philosophy that they tried to argue, I think is so dumb because what could be more universal than learning to be friends with those around you? Like learning to have friends. That
If you want to get even more specific, the most universal thing about Luca is this simple idea. I want to spend the summer building a bike with my friends.
That's it. That's what that movie is.
That's what that movie's about. The conflict of that movie is whether they'll be able to get this bike so they can spend the whole summer together and ride together. That's what the movie is about.
Sense.
Like
Absolutely no sense
I think
whatsoever.
every kid has had a certain aspiration that could be directly or indirectly tied to that idea. Luca is one of the most universal films that Pixar has ever made.
Yeah. You know, that singular thing that only a few people experience, having your period, right? That's not universal. Surely no one will be able to understand that movie.
I mean, talk to Japan. They were doing that for so long in 1991 when Only Yesterday came out.
Yeah. Unbelievable. At any rate, all joking aside, but maybe with the joking, you do wonder how this is going to work going forward, because that's their new mantra, as dumb as it is. That's their new mantra. Inside Out 2, on its way to doing $1 billion, maybe to your point, $1.5 billion. Does this change things for them going forward?
I hope not. It's unfortunate that we're seeing the success for Pixar like this. We want to see this kind of success for Pixar, but it's coming so close, so closely tied to that recent interview that they gave about what their new creative agenda is. And I think that's making it seem more unfortunate and more fearful for those of us that do also want to see original content from Pixar. I think a lot of this is also going to be determined a year from now when they have another original film coming out called Elio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, I've seen a teaser for it. It looks, I mean, all Pixar teasers are very non-revealing. Like they keep things very close to the chest, which I really appreciate, but it makes their teasers not really all that great. But some of their best movies have had pretty, for lack of a better term, pretty lame marketing. But if Elio is a success, then we can really start having a different conversation. I think that could confirm things for us.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was going to be my next point as well. Like, I hate to put that kind of pressure on Elio, but if that film comes out and it falters, my God, that's going to be unfortunate, because it's going to give credence to this stupid new philosophy.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to run rampant with all these sequels and more IP.
Yeah.
I mean, but how long? Like, surely there's a shelf life to that, right? At some point, people are going to get tired of all of that and want new stuff.
I would hope so. I really hope
would
so.
hope so.
Because, because I mean, we already know Toy Story 5 is coming out. If they're only going to be doing sequels, what's left for them to do? Like, what is the most likely case outside of the Toy Story franchise? Are they going to jump right to Inside Out 3 and maybe do something that expands on on Inside Out 2? Because I don't think they're going to. I mean, maybe they could. Like I was going to say, I don't think they'll do Incredibles 3, but I mean, Brad Bird doesn't have to do it. I don't think he'll want to do it. And we've seen many cases where Disney especially will move forward on a film regardless of who's making it.
Ratatouille with the number 2.
If they do that, the way you felt about Inside Out is how I feel about Ratatouille. The idea of a sequel to that, it's like, okay, I'm intrigued, but I am scared shitless for that. I would be so scared for a sequel to Ratatouille. I think there's something you can explore there, but if they title it Ratatouille, then we've got a problem.
Well, surely that's what they would do. Ratatouille.
Yeah, I'd love for them to get a little bit more creative with like maybe the Parisian side of that. I don't know. Maybe make it an allusion to some classic French New Wave film. Call it Ratatouille Mon Amour or something like that. So I think that'd be a little bit more clever, but I don't know.
Yeah, Remy the Bear.
Remy the Bear.
I don't know.
I like that one too.
Maybe that'll work. Because the Bear's doing really great. Yeah. I have not seen that show until today. I watched season 1, episode 1 today. That's the first foray I've had into that show. So I am just getting started.
Okay.
I have a long way to go to catch up because season 3, I think, just came out.
Yes, it just came out.
I guess that's the one thing about being sick is you have some extra.
You get
time
to watch a
on your
lot of
hands.
stuff. You get to watch a lot of stuff.
I honestly though, like I've been so out of it that I haven't been watching as much as I could have because I've either been sleeping a lot or even when I have been awake, like I just can't find the energy to pay attention. And so I just haven't been watching until Sam comes home and like he cuddles and we watch Inside Out, or the other day he's like, I want to watch The Meg 2. So we watched The Meg 2.
I'm sorry. I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it's any good or
Oh
not.
no, it's absolutely as terrible as you thought it would be. Yeah, it's
in a good way, like so bad it's good.
I guess it depends on the kind of mood that you're in. Maybe
Fair.
because I wasn't feeling great. Like it's fine.
Well, it sort of sounds like we're in a similar camp rather, that when I'm not feeling well and I'm going to watch something, it's usually going to be something that I've already seen because I just don't have the energy to decipher or comprehend something new that I really want to take seriously and really give my undivided attention to. I need something that's going to make me comfortable, something that's going to relax
exactly.
me. Yeah.
Exactly. So we watched, that's what he wanted to watch.
Yeah.
And then the latest one was Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One.
Oh.
And I got to say, that's a movie I'm coming around on more.
I want to like it so. I want to like it.
Yeah.
It has, I think, some of the best things from any Star Wars film. It also has some of my least favorite things from any Star Wars film. It is simultaneously the best and worst Star Wars film for me. And I want to love it so much more because those things that are great about it, oh my gosh, it has so many great things about it.
For sure. I'm coming around with each viewing. I'm coming around more and more, and I'm really liking it. I still don't think it works on the whole, and reading the novel that comes with it is certainly necessary.
Catalyst, yeah.
Catalyst is great.
This is why I'm always battling with Rogue One, because in a way I am with you that given the context of that book that comes before it narratively, it's a prequel to Rogue One in many ways. And also with how Andor works around it and the fact that now we know that director Krennic, Ben Mendelsohn, is coming back for Andor season 2. There's a lot of other things that are adding the necessary context we originally wanted for Rogue One. And now that's there, it makes Rogue One better. But does that also make it worse that the movie itself doesn't function on its own terms? That's the thing I keep going back on.
Yeah, and I think those are fair questions, and I've gotten to the point where I can live with them.
Okay.
Because I mean, I have read Catalyst. I really loved Andor quite a bit, and I think the film is like I do enjoy it more on each watch. I'm coming around on it. So
good to hear.
At any rate, but yeah, those are like those have been my comfort viewings. One of them is a little bit of an outlier.
I love how this whole segment was supposed to be about the box office success of Inside Out 2, and we veered into hockey movies, sports movies, comfort movies, when sick, and all of the above.
Yeah,
so we might as well call this Rabbit Hole the podcast.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, let's transition to the late, great Donald Sutherland, who unfortunately passed away last week at the age of 88.
Yep,
Trying to remember
88
what it
years old.
was.
Yeah, I think it was about a
Yeah.
week ago since we were recording
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 88 years old,
Mhm.
obviously known for a lot of great performances and great movies, some iconic shots and moments in films over the years. I don't know where to begin with this other than it's sad to hear of his passing. The man was devoted to his craft all the way till the end, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
And he's simply one of the best. Will be missed, but I'm grateful that we have all this great work that we can go back to anytime.
It's a shame he was never even nominated for a single Oscar in his
Yeah, that's
career, which I
crazy.
think is astounding. Something we talk about a lot when we want to reflect on an actor who has just passed and what made that actor so good. We often talk about versatility. I think that always makes a great actor, but Donald Sutherland embodied this idea of versatility, I think more so than most other people in his field. He
Mhm.
was at times the most charming and lovable man on screen. And then in maybe the next movie, he would scare you half to death. I think about his performances in, let's say, the 1974 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That final image it's so memeified now that it's kind of
Yeah,
engraved into our film
yeah.
culture. It is one of the most
Mhm.
frightening shots of any film from that era. And then you couple that with his performance in Don't Look Now and how both horrific
Mhm.
and tragic that is. And then something as lovable as, say, Pride and Prejudice. uh, the first thing I ever saw Donald Sutherland in that really caught my attention was the Clint Eastwood film Space Cowboys.
Yeah.
That's a film that features Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, and James Garner. And in many ways, I always felt like Donald Sutherland was the standout because he just made me laugh. He was so charming and just made me laugh.
Mhm.
And it's such a different kind of performance when you compare it to what he would do in the 70s. And what a versatile presence. I no one did it like he did. I really think he was one of the best at it.
Yeah, absolutely one of the best. And I agree with you. I think what makes him great is the range that you get in his
Mhm.
films. You
Yeah,
mentioned quite a few of them. Their Invasion of the Body Snatchers is certainly a big one.
for sure.
Ordinary People, he was absolutely devastating in that film.
Yeah.
He's really great in a small little role in JFK. And that's the thing, whether he's in a
Mhm.
leading role or he has a small role, it's always extremely memorable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as some people pointed out on social media this last week, even in his late 70s, he so desperately wanted to portray President Snow that he wrote a letter
Yeah.
uh, to get that role.
Yeah.
Like he really wanted to do that, which I didn't know that, and
So interesting.
I just
So
found that
interesting.
fascinating. Like even at 78 or whatever he was, I'm gonna write this letter
I
to
want to
President
be
Snow in
in the Hunger
Games.
Games.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so many great films and performances from over the years.
Yeah.
It's hard to choose one, but one of those like Don't Look Now is probably considered to be his best work
Maybe.
generally.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a good consensus pick.
A good consensus pick. I mean, obviously you can pick quite a few,
Oh, for sure.
but I
Yeah.
feel like I've seen more for that one than any others, but I guess
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. I mean, they're all fantastic. He's done so many great things over the years, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful that we get to have those to always go back
Absolutely.
to. We'll
Absolutely.
miss them for sure.
What a heck of a career.
Okay. With that said, no easy way out of that conversation, but R.I.P. Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
One last thing before we move on to our movie series. There was a report earlier today, I believe, as we are recording this, that Warner Brothers has decided, you know what? This whole Max thing might not be working out all that well. So this Harry Potter show that we're doing, and these other quote unquote Max originals we have in the pipeline. We're gonna call those HBO originals. The guys, those are HBO originals, not Max. We don't want you to call them Max. Our hands are clean of this.
Yeah.
It's HBO.
Yeah.
You got, that's what we wanted to call them this whole time. Total backtracking. Shocking. Who could have seen that coming?
LOL. that's all I have to say. LOL. That's what I have to say about this. And we talked about this, right? I feel like we've talked about this very thing when HBO Max, as it was called, when they rebranded themselves as Max, how silly that this seems. And I think one of the things we talked about was just the notoriety that those three letters have. HBO. There is a reputation there with those three letters. When we think of, let's say, for instance, we think of Band of Brothers, one of the greatest shows ever put to television, regardless of what specific form of television it was put on. We think of those letters HBO. It's what we think about with The Sopranos, all of these classic shows that came through that medium. Those letters are just sort of engraved into that culture. Regardless of what you call this streaming service now as Max, whatever it is, we're always associating it with HBO. Like that's always going to be there. And you can't rebrand that. Like you can't rebrand that. And it seems as though they're now finally realizing the problem that they were in. And we told them this was going to be a problem. And yeah, look what's happening.
Yeah, it's hilarious because the whole world came together collectively to be like, this is the dumbest thing ever. It should be HBO. Always should be HBO.
Yeah.
It has a brand reputation for a reason. Why are you not utilizing it?
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, a year later or whatever it's been, and they're like, yeah, okay, you guys were right.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to go, we're going to go back.
It also doesn't help that what they chose to rebrand it with was one of the most overly simplified names that they could think of, Max. I don't think that helped either, but to your point and what we're talking about here, HBO itself just has such a reputation that you can't disregard. You just can't lose that.
Nobody knows what a Max is. What is a Max?
It's a pretty common name for a dog.
Yeah. Maybe it's a product for a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to read Max and go, of course that's the streaming service that used to be HBO.
Yeah, my first thought it's a streaming service all about shows about animals and pets. Like I would log on and expect to see the Christopher Guest movie Best in Show as one of the prime movies on there.
So dumb. So dumb. Brendan, let's talk about our ifs. Do you have
our
an
ifs?
if?
I had a few ifs growing up. A few imaginary friends. Yeah. And funny enough, most of them were not creatures. They're mostly all other people.
Oh, really?
But I did have some ifs growing up.
Well, I don't really recall. The only if that I feel like I am familiar with that I want back in my life is Bing Bong. I want Bing Bong back.
I mean, that's everybody's if after they saw that in 2015, right?
I know that's the goat of the ifs is Bing Bong for sure.
The if goat.
The if goat for sure. Anyway, we're here to talk about John Krasinski's new film If, which is now out on digital.
Yeah,
or rented. It's crazy. That film was in theaters like 3 days ago, but it is already available to rent.
It is. Yeah. Had some good legs at the box office at the last minute, so it was doing fairly well. It had some people going to see it, which was really exciting.
Exactly. Of course, it stars Ryan Reynolds. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of this guy. Here he's okay.
Yeah. John Krasinski has a voice role here. Steve Carell.
It's got an extensive
Haley
voice
Fleming.
cast. A lot of cameos in this one.
A lot of cameos. Absolutely. Yeah. So, If it is about a young girl who goes through a difficult experience, she begins to see everyone's imaginary friends who have left behind as their real life friends have grown up. I don't think I read that right, but again, could be the drugs.
I think most people know about this movie, so I think they know what they're getting into. A charming film about your ifs.
Yeah. I feel like this is a topic, like this is a trend lately. Because have you seen that movie on Netflix? The one that's coming out? What is it called? The Imagineers?
No, I have not seen that one.
The Imaginaries.
Haven't seen it, no.
It's a very similar premise. Well,
okay, interesting.
Maybe not similar. Actually, I retract that altogether. But it also has to do with imaginary friends. So between If and Inside Out and that film, it's just the thing to do now.
That's true. Yeah.
So look, we have 5 digital codes to give away for If. So if you want to get together with your ifs and watch this film, now's the time to do it.
That's it.
We got 5 digital codes to give away. So send out all your invites, your party invites to your ifs, get them together, rent this movie, and boom, your Friday night is ready to go.
Yeah, it's an if party, not a LAN party. It's an if party.
Exactly. So, how you can win one of those codes, simply follow us on social media. Be on the lookout. We'll have a tweet or we'll have a post ready to go. All you got to do is follow the instructions and boom, you're entered. It's that simple.
Yep. That's it.
So be sure to follow us. Be on the lookout for that. And we thank If and all the ifs for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. I love coffee. So I've unfortunately not had enough coffee over the last 5 days.
Well, I was going to ask, can you even drink coffee when you're feeling sick? I'm someone that can't even stomach coffee when I'm feeling sick.
No, I haven't had much of an appetite for anything over the last 5 days.
Yeah, exactly.
I probably dropped 10 pounds. I haven't eaten anything. I've had I've had some blueberries. You've
had the necessary fibers, the fruits and vegetables that you need to try and fight this thing.
Yeah. I've eaten a little. I've had some soups. I got a nice little soup.
Okay.
I made myself some ramen the other night.
That's good.
That's about all I could stomach at this point. I just haven't had my appetite yet. And so coffee, unfortunately, hasn't been there. Right. But once I get better, I'm going to start drinking the ever-living snot out of it.
Good.
So I can't wait because coffee's the best. We love it. That's why we love coffee. They source specialty grade coffee from all over the world. But what does that mean? Well, a lot of coffee, especially if it claims that it's high in caffeine content, that you're probably looking at a lesser grade coffee.
Yeah.
Because the most caffeine comes in a bean called Robusta. Robusta coffee is garbage. It tastes terrible. It's like drinking mud from your shoes. It is no good. But it does have a lot of caffeine.
I've never heard that analogy, and I'm like, gosh.
Yeah, so companies will take Robusta, they'll mix it with Arabica coffee, and they'll blend it all up. And so, you don't know any different, because you're going to put milk and sugar into that nonsense anyway.
Oh, yeah, you're going to drown it and turn it into caffeinated milk.
Yeah. Well, Coffee Cult isn't interested in any of that nonsense. I mean, we're talking about high-end gourmet coffee. Like, this is the best coffee on the planet. And you really taste it in the coffee itself, like naturally. You don't have to add milk and sugar. If you want to add those things, that's fine. But the coffees come with natural flavors of like blueberries, strawberries, citrus fruit, chocolate, oats, just depending on the coffee that you get. And it is vivid. It's detailed. It's fantastic. Like I drink all of it straight up. Like I don't put anything in it. It's just that good. So if you want to if you want to try it, get some coffee.
It's so good. So good.
Head on over to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. And use our code. We have a new code.
Yeah.
For those that have been listening for a while, you may know what our code used to be. It has changed. Our new code is ISF24, 24 as in the year 2024.
Yep.
ISF24. Use that code at checkout and you'll get 15% off your order. And you're going to love it. It's fantastic coffee.
It's so good. I cannot wait for you, JD. The second that you're feeling better, you're going to wake up the next morning. It's going to be like Christmas, right?
I know.
It's gonna, like you're going to have that cup of coffee cult waiting for you. And it's going to be, your mouth is watering. I can see it.
I know. Exactly. So coffeecult.com, use that code ISF24. That's the new code. And we thank them for their support. All right. Let's go ahead and transition to our Best Picture movie series. We are almost through the 1940s.
That's true.
The next on our list is Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. Brendan, was this a first-time watch for you?
It was not.
No.
It was a first-time watch for me back in high school. So there was a point in high school where I think it was maybe 11th grade, we started to learn more about the works of William Shakespeare. And one of the things we would do, and I think a lot of schools did this, this is not unique to my high school upbringing or anything like that. It's a pretty easy curriculum to do here. You might read a play from William Shakespeare together in class. Maybe you might act it out or something. And then you might see one of the famous film versions to see how it differentiates or what it does differently, what it does better, and what it does worse. And I recall this being the film we watched after we read Hamlet together in class. And we talked a lot about those differences there. So it wasn't a first-time watch for me in that regard, but I hadn't seen it since. So that was almost 15, 20 years ago, probably something close to that maybe. So it has been a while, and there's a lot about it that I did forget. For reasons I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, so it wasn't a first-time watch, but it almost might as well have been for the context of this movie series and trying to bring a fresh perspective onto it.
Gotcha. This was a first-time watch for me.
Okay.
Which made it all the more impossible. We just got done talking about how when you're on your bed, couch, and in need of some comfort, what are the movies you go to? Usually films that you've seen before that make you feel good.
Your comfort movies, right?
Your comfort movies.
You don't necessarily go to William Shakespeare.
You don't go to a 2.5 hour William Shakespeare, Laurence Olivier Best Picture winner. That I would not consider a comfort movie for me. However, I did end up watching this movie not only at or when I was sick, but at the peak of me just feeling absolutely miserable. That's when I decided to watch this because I knew that we needed to watch it for the show.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure when we were getting to record because we had planned to do this recording earlier than we're doing it now.
Right.
So I wanted to have it in my pocket. I wanted to at least have seen it so that way we could talk about it here on the show.
Yeah.
But timing wise, it was just awful because it aligned with my illness just ravaging me at the worst possible time.
Yeah.
So it took nothing short of at least 5 different times of trying to get through this film.
Took a
like
miracle.
in 5 different segments.
Yeah.
Like I broke it up into like 5 or 6 different segments because I could only get through a little bit of it at a time. I was just
sure.
I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable.
And it's a lengthy and in some cases a difficult watch already, even if you're not feeling sick like that. So I can only imagine how challenging it was for you. And, you know, the language of Shakespeare is mostly retained here. So that type of language, that diction that he's known for, if you're not in the right headspace for that, that is a difficult that's a difficult thing to absorb. So I
Yes.
certainly get you there.
And that's why I lay that context out there, because I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't really have too much to say about this movie. I need to give it more of a fair shake when I'm not dying and completely doped up on drugs, and can watch this film in its entirety and really put myself into it, because I struggled to get through it. Like I said, it took me like 5 or 6 different times to get through it. And the dialogue is dense, and there is a lot to kind of sift through to try to find clarity. And generally, I wouldn't call myself a William Shakespeare expert by any means. I am more than familiar with Hamlet. I have seen other iterations of Hamlet. I'm not unfamiliar with Hamlet. I haven't seen this film specifically, but know the story, know the play for sure. But I'm not a Shakespeare connoisseur.
Same.
So that, coupled with the fact that I'm dying, and that's when I decide to watch this. Oh boy, it just
like
made for.
You drank the poison, and they told you to try and watch Hamlet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, watching this was like, dipping your spear into some poison and just cutting yourself.
And that's not to be unfair to the movie itself. Like, I'll try to, at least, I guess, in lieu of you and your sickness restricting you from giving this a fair shake, I can at least offer my thoughts on it briefly. Unlike you, I don't have as much to say on this one as I had about other films in this series. It's not my least favorite film in this 1940s Best Picture series that we've done thus far. But I think it's definitely one that represented more of a change of pace for Hollywood at that time, because this was, from what I understand, the first English sound movie production of Hamlet. So in many ways, this was a movie that kind of set the precedent of what a cinematic Shakespeare adaptation could be. And that, I think, makes it a relic in many ways. I think that makes it a very interesting movie. It certainly makes it a really interesting precursor for what Kenneth Branagh could even do with it in the 1990s, because what Laurence Olivier is doing here is more or less what Kenneth Branagh would do many decades later.
Yeah.
Laurence Olivier is using this as really a showcase for himself, right? As a man that would direct it and star in it. And he's also one of the few people who ever directed himself to a Best Actor win.
Yeah.
I think
it's only happened twice, right?
Yeah. The only other person I think was Roberto Benigni for Life is Beautiful. So it hasn't happened very often. So the movie's a relic. It's a time capsule of a movie. I think where I have less to say about this one is really why it's so challenging to talk about any cinematic adaptation of a William Shakespeare play, because there's a line to draw. When are you talking about the movie versus when are you just reviewing Shakespeare's play? And I think there have been other adaptations of Shakespeare's work since 1948 that have been able to function in their own cinematic way, with their own cinematic language, that certainly have a debt of gratitude to give to Hamlet here. But I think others have personified it in a more cinematic way that make them more interesting. Because I think in some ways, what Laurence Olivier is doing here is it's well shot, it's well performed and everything, but a lot of it really is a cinematic and truncated version of Hamlet. I don't really think it's necessarily doing anything to really set itself apart from just the Shakespeare play, which is perfectly fine. But as we've seen many times over, movies like The Tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Cohen, that is purely Macbeth. That is absolutely Shakespeare's play. But it also feels like a Joel Cohen film. Like, it feels very much like its own cinematic thing. And then, of course, we've had movies like The Lion King and Throne of Blood from Akira Kurosawa that would take Shakespeare's plays and use them more as loose inspirations for their own stories. And those make for really fascinating conversations. So I think that's what makes Hamlet here for me from 1948 from Laurence Olivier. I think it's now sort of lost in this landscape, but I give it credit for maybe setting the precedent for that landscape simultaneously.
See, that's really interesting, and this could absolutely be the drugs talking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought Desmond Dickinson's cinematography was sensational.
I thought it was really great. Yeah.
I loved it. Like just as a visual experience, and admittedly that was the biggest thing I could grasp onto because, dying and all.
Yeah.
But I thought that the visual landscape of this film is incredible. It's so evocative, and you definitely see like Orson Welles in this. Like
which he was inspired
tricks.
by. Yeah,
Yeah.
Lawrence, he has admitted that he was actually inspired by Citizen Kane, I think, when when trying to make this film.
And you do see that. You absolutely see that in the film. So like the camera tricks and the use of shadow here, and the framing, how the zooms kind of go in and out at times.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty sensational as a visual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was engrossed by the film in that regard.
Yeah.
You are right that much of the character work here, the story work here, it is Shakespeare. Aside from a few cuts, I know that Olivier, much to the chagrin of some critics at the time, he cut certain elements of the play out.
Yeah.
That Kenneth Branagh would keep in his version in 1996.
Yeah.
But, you're trying to condense. This is Shakespeare's longest play, and you're trying to make it cinematically appetizing, I guess.
Oh yeah,
and
2.5 hours. 2.5 hours for the
1940s.
Yeah, 2.5 hours for the 1940s is probably like seeing a 5-hour movie nowadays, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. When most movies are 90 minutes, and you're like, "What is this? Almost 3 hours?"
Exactly. Yeah, you are absolutely right about the way the film looks. In fact, the art direction, especially, I thought was really great. And I mentioned the tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Cohen earlier. It did remind me a little bit of that. I think there are similar things happening. They're both very ghostly in that regard, and I do like what Laurence Olivier does as a filmmaker to sort of retain the ghostliness of Shakespeare's Hamlet.
The literal ghostliness.
The literal ghostliness, yeah. And I guess if there is a way to, attempt to make this feel like its own thing, by making those cuts that you're talking about from the original play. So, for instance, there's no Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in this movie, even though some of the lines of Guildenstern, I think, are maybe given to Polonius, if I'm not mistaken here. And, for those listening, if you're not familiar with Hamlet in general, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, that's Timon and Pumbaa. So it's those characters specifically.
I think how you make that reference and everyone's like, "Oh, I get
it.
Like I know what he's talking about." Yeah.
Yeah. And selfishly, I think they're my two favorite characters from Hamlet because it led to one of my favorite plays called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, which I think is really great and really funny. That's beside the point. But I do think what Laurence Olivier is doing by cutting some of those things, he's really trying to turn this more into an introspective psychodrama on Hamlet himself. It really is a showcase for that person. So it's and it really deals more in the psychological and political feelings he is going through. So it might be a little bit more literal in that regard, but it really becomes a showcase for not just Olivier himself, but the person of Hamlet. So he's at least trying to do that. And I do give him credit for doing that. But then we've also seen so many other Shakespeare adaptations do similar things that I think were more successsul. So this was certainly the first of its kind, if I don't necessarily think it's the best of its kind anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I wouldn't say that it's the best version of Hamlet by any stretch of the imagination, but I do appreciate its psychological ambitions, and that is mostly effective here, especially thanks to Olivier's performance. But also the direction and the cinematography, as we talked about earlier. Like, there is a nice marriage of those ghostly kind of like that kind of vibe here and how it influences the characters and how they behave and act. I
Yeah.
do think is really great. You know, perhaps some of the dialogue and how it goes between, you know, from scene to scene can be a little wonky at times, but that could also be the drugs. So it's
Well,
hard for me to fully say.
I don't think
But
you're. I think you're onto something there. Sorry to cut you off, because one thing I noticed, and I don't know if it was intentional, but there are times when Hamlet himself, or I guess Laurence Olivier, is monologuing, and it would sometimes cut back and forth between actual monologuing and internalized monologuing, as if it's
yes,
voiceover. It went back and forth, and if
yes,
that
it
was
did.
the intent, I actually think that's a very interesting way to go about it. And I
Yeah,
can't recall if that was true to Shakespeare's play. That's something I'm admittedly forgetting. But if it was something that Olivier chose to do himself, I think it's actually a neat way to emphasize the potential madness and insanity of Hamlet.
mhm.
So that was another touch that I thought was pretty well handled, to at least give it its own identity, if that's what he was going for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do like those elements of it. Like when it's
Mhm,
trying to emphasize the psychological
mhm.
or whatever guilt he might be feeling, and
Yeah.
should he take, you know, his uncle's life when he's laying there over the edge. Like
Mhm,
the whole sequence is handled pretty well, I thought. So,
mhm.
you know, I just think on the whole, again, this was hard for me to get through because of my illness, but
Right.
I I I still like I love the artistry on display still, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I did too. I liked the sword fight at the end. I thought that was
Yeah.
actually really well choreographed. There are things this movie is doing cinematically that I can certainly see for its time really being on the forefront for what Shakespeare adaptations would eventually be. And we've seen many adaptations of not just Hamlet, but Shakespeare in general.
Mhm.
I think a fun conversation would be to talk about our favorite Shakespeare adaptations, loose and direct, because you could talk about anything as direct as not even just this, but Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. Then you can talk about as something as indirect as 10 Things I Hate About You, which is based on the Taming of the
Mhm.
Shrew. Like, there are so many things that have been so creative over the years. And if this is the movie that, if this is sort of like the Beatles to music, like if it led to everything that would come afterwards, then you have to respect it. You absolutely have
Yeah.
to respect it.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I do want to, before we kind of wind down here,
Hmm.
there are a few images in the film that I think are truly mesmerizing.
Hmm.
One of my favorite shots of the film is of the what is the character's name? The girl at the end
Uh,
of the film.
Ophelia, is that it?
Ophelia.
Okay.
Yes, Ophelia. When there's a shot of her in the creek and
Oh yeah, it's pretty
she's
haunting.
kind of slowly going down the creek and you see her arm kind of wavering there gently,
Hmm.
tenderly in the water, and you get this beautiful voiceover narration to accompany the visual. I thought was such a graceful and poetic way to exhibit what happens to that character in that moment.
Hmm.
It's such a beautiful shot that artistically it had so much vigor to it, that I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's a great point.
like I like that's a moment that just pops in the film.
Yeah,
And yeah, I
pretty
just love the,
horrific.
you know, same thing with like the ghost and how that kind of comes to
Hmm.
how that is kind of shown here visually.
Hmm.
I think is also fantastic as well. The voice work there is really great. I mean, there's some visceral craft here that I was really astounded by. That truly is great.
Yeah, yeah. It weirdly reminded me of Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal in some ways, and this came out I think 9 years before that, but it retains some of those fantastical ghostly qualities that I do think are compelling. I think this is a great aesthetic experience,
It
and if
is.
if
Yeah.
that's the thing that really distinguishes it from other Shakespeare adaptations that we've seen, then that is a great way to distinguish it, because Shakespeare adaptations are known to look great, and this does have its own visual language that is pretty creative. It's just in some of those other cases, like when I think of the Tragedy of Macbeth by Joel Cohen, it's great visually, and even though narratively it is still Shakespeare through and through, it still carries its own unique emotional trajectory that feels like it's still part of its own DNA. And I think that's where this version of Hamlet doesn't quite distinguish itself from others, because I think internally, while I do think Laurence Olivier is doing some great and interesting things to, make this version more introspective and more so about Hamlet front and center as a psychodrama, like we said, I still think the trajectory of it is basically Hamlet. So yeah, and that's where that line is drawn that I still kind of struggle with, but I'm glad I saw it. I'm glad I saw this aesthetic experience, which I was very enthralled by.
And it wasn't even nominated for Best Cinematography. That blows my mind.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think it was also an upset that John Huston won Best Director this year for The Treasure of Sierra Madrid, and Sierra Madre is actually what it's called. And I guess people expected it to be a three-peat between Laurence Olivier for actor, director, and this winning Best Picture, but it took home actor and picture, where John Huston won Best Director instead. So it's funny how that was considered an upset, but nowadays people would look back on that film thinking that probably should have won Best Picture as opposed to Hamlet.
Yeah,
I might agree, but I'm glad that a film that did win at least had some type of influence in a cinematic movement that we would see.
For sure. And while we haven't really discussed that too much in these conversations, and I don't know if I really want to get into it too much. It might depend on the film in the year that we're talking about, but there's probably going to be a lot of movies we cover in the series, whether we like it or not, where at the end of it, we wouldn't have voted for it for Best Picture.
I know. That's what makes it interesting.
That is what makes it interesting. Because like Hamlet is, to your point, it is really well crafted. It's really well performed. There is a lot to like about it. It doesn't quite hold a candle to something like The Red Shoes, for example.
No.
Or even Sierra Madre.
No. I mean, yeah, if we're getting into this specific year and what we've seen and what we think should have won, because, I have not seen The Snake Pit or Johnny Belinda, but I have seen the other three. Yeah, The Red Shoes gets my vote.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's how history would look at this year, generally. Yeah. And obviously, from person to person, that'll differ, but I'd say the consensus would be The Red Shoes for sure.
Yeah. I do think it's funny how when Hamlet won Best Picture, it was presented by Ethel Barrymore. Well, Laurence Olivier wasn't even there because I think he was performing it on stage with his wife, Vivian Lee, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But the movie's award was presented by Ethel Barrymore, and I'm reading the trivia here, so I can just say it verbatim. Ethel Barrymore, whose late younger brother John Barrymore was considered the great Hamlet of the 20th century, alongside that of Sir John Gielgud, and she actually denounced Sir Laurence Olivier and this movie. And ironically, she's the one that presented this award and gave it to Hamlet. So I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah.
That is really funny. Oh, life's ironies. Sometimes they're really great.
I'm glad they exist for those reasons.
Well, I apologize to the Shakespeare lovers and fans out there if you're expecting us to really dig into this. I sadly don't have too much to offer this go around. But I did like it, despite the arduous journey it was to get through it. I did enjoy it, for sure.
Hey, a good critic is able to admit that and not try to fake their way through it. So, yeah, good for you.
I appreciate it. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say on Hamlet, leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always reach out to us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can email us on InSessionFilm@gmail.com. As far as plugs, there's a new Women in Session out, so you can go and check that out. I was able to, again, when the jerks kicked in the other day, I was able to get that edited.
Yep.
Where Jaylon and Kristen, they talk about streaming and physical
Yeah.
media. They debate that, the pros and cons of both. That was a really fun conversation. There's a new Chasing the Gold from last Friday with Zach Youngs, who's one of our writers, that I thought was really good. Really, really good. Definitely urge people to go and check that out from last week if they haven't already. We, of course, have a podcast review of The Bike Riders out, so you can go and check that out. And I don't know what we're getting into this week. I'm just now getting my head above water. So
I do know it's A Quiet Place Day 1 is what
go.
we've got coming next week. So that'll be the next main review.
And
that we have.
Horizon? Are we getting Horizon this week?
Ooh, if we are, I don't know if I have time for that. We'll have to talk about the schedule. I didn't have it that early, but man, we've got a busy one if that's the case.
Because I think it does come out this week, this Friday. I think we get A Quiet Place, Horizon, and then who knows what else will trickle through. I really want to see Thelma, June Squibb. Oh my gosh, I got to go see Thelma.
I might try and see that tomorrow just to get out of the way.
Yeah, I really want to see that one as well. So, yeah, if I'm feeling up to it, maybe I'll sneak out to the theaters. Who knows?
Good luck.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, we'll figure that out, but be on the lookout for anything we have coming soon. Brendan, anything I'm missing before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I'll just once again say, I hope you feel better. And I'm glad that you're still here because our camaraderie I love this camaraderie that we have for movie talking. And the fact that you still made an effort to be here, I'm going to applaud you for that.
I appreciate it. I tried to make an effort and, again, doped myself up on drugs so I could get through this. I survived okay.
You did.
It'll take some editing, but we'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think we made it through. Hopefully it was listenable or watchable, I guess, if you're on YouTube.
From my side, it was talkable. So I guess that means it works.
Yeah, I hope people enjoyed it despite me, sounding like I, am drowning with sand in my mouth or something. But, I did my best. I'm sorry. I did my best.
It sounded good, my man. It sounded good.
All right. Well, with all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. 2 parades, Brendan. The parades are definitely out.
Lots of parades.